All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for stopping by. We hope you have some good takeaways today. Today we really just want to share our journey with you on reducing instructional cost. It's a collaborative project. My name is Kelly Kramer. I am the Network Behavior Specialist for Wayside Schools. And this is one of my colleagues, Ann Melcher. She is an assistant principal at one of our elementary schools, Eden Park Academy. And this collaborative effort involved, the network, and we have 5 campuses. I'll tell you more about that. But Ann will talk specifically about the initiatives that they launched on their campuses to help us get there. So today we'll talk about the very first thing that presented itself, and that was after taking time to really collect cohesive data across all 5 campuses in the year 23-24. When we got that data back, it was very clear that we had a challenge ahead of us. So the first section will be to talk about that challenge. I'll then share with you the network responses, the way we felt we wanted to move forward to address the problems that had presented themselves. And then Ann will take us through the campus response from Eden Park Academy, one of our elementary schools. And then we'll talk about the outcomes. Did the work we do help? And we'll let you know that.
All right, just so that you're aware, I am recording this. I'm using it for another project that I'm working on. It's only facing me and not y'all, just so that you're aware. All right, so these are our vision and our mission. So remember, visions is what future success looks like. And so all children, regardless of background, are prepared to succeed in college and reach the highest potential. So our mission, the ways that we're getting to our success, we are through rigorous academics and an inclusive and caring community. Wayside ensures all scholars are college ready and prepared to be engaged in successful leaders. So so many of these words, the inclusive, the caring community, the engaged part of it is definitely some of the things that we're going to be talking about today as part of our mission that leads to our success of our schools. So our catchphrase is all means all, and they mean it.
We got fancy. I forgot that we put that in there.
I forgot we put that in there too. All right, so these are our campuses. So we have Altamira Academy. Let's start with our OG. So we have our OG, which is Eden Park Academy. We started in 1998, so that was the first campus for Wayside Networks. We then added Real Learning Academy, SciTech Middle School, SciTech High School, and then we added Altamira. That was our last campus. And so we will take you on a little preview of Eden Park Academy as we talk about how we reduce our loss of instructional time.
All right, so let's go into the challenge as it presented itself. I started at Wayside in March of 21. So right about the time we started to bring kids back to schools. We were hybrid at that point. And it took me a minute, just like anybody else when you get to a new network, to figure out what it is that you need to accomplish, right? You have to figure out what the problem is first, like what are the root causes, before you can really address anything. And one thing that became clear to me is that we weren't collecting cohesive data. I didn't know what was happening as a network, but I could see some pictures of each campus, but as a whole, I couldn't understand where we were. It was very disjointed. So I spent the year of 23-24 gathering that data that was cohesive across all 5. And so what became very clear to me is that I really needed to collect the data of how much instruction are we losing with our scholars because of behavior and discipline. And this number blew me away. It's 529 days of instruction across all 5 campuses collectively. So this is a lot. We had about 1,750 scholars, and because of exclusionary practices, we were actually choosing to take children out of the learning environment. I won't spend a lot of time here. This is just a snapshot that I presented to see that we lost 173 days with out-of-school suspension just by itself. 304 days of in-school suspension. And then PPU, I always abbreviate this and everyone's like, what is that? It's parent pickup. So having parents pick their child up and saying, you know what, we'll try again tomorrow. Definitely wanted to look at equity. 41% of our office referrals belong to scholars with individual education plans, 32% bilingual population. We had 1,640 times our school leadership teams were pulled from their duties to intervene with challenging behavior that year. Not that that's not one of their duties, but we definitely wanted to get them in the classroom more, in the hallways more, to drive the cultures that we were trying to drive. We also collect data called minor incidents, and this means that office staff, administrative staff wasn't involved, but it's information that we want to gather so that if we need to dive in and figure out root causes for a specific scholar, we have that information. So that's information that goes in, there's no consequence tied to it. It is just information, antecedent behavior consequence information for us. Of interest, the majority of Wayside office referrals, this was across all 5 campuses, were beginning during non-instructional times inside the classroom. As a result, our academic leadership team took on engagement strategies and did a really great job with that last year. And then you can see some of these other things that we gathered. One thing that I started to plant seeds about was collaborative problem solving. And you can see in the year 23-24, we used collaborative problem solving 197 times. Definitely loved natural consequences, loss of privileges, 230 times, but that SD, skill development, just 17 times. So those were things we definitely wanted to increase. The data that really glared at me became very clear that we were not addressing our chronic, scholars with chronic behaviors and reoccurring behaviors. So 3% of AMA scholars attributed to 65% of office referrals. And you can see this pattern happening across all 3 elementary schools. Eden Park, where we will focus, 5% was 69% of our office referrals. So it was very clear that we were letting scholars marinate in their unproductive behavior, okay? And then this is our secondary campuses. So then our goal became nothing marinates. How do we do that? So let's talk about responses. How, as a network, are we going to drive 5 campuses to respond to the data that we just collected? Because ultimately, we know we need our accountability scores to go up. Accountability scores aren't going to go up if scholars aren't in the class learning the information. They're not having access to the curriculum. So I knew reducing instructional costs was going to be a primary goal for us. I also thought it was really important for us to really identify where we fell as a network, and we felt very clear as a network that we were falling in the bottom 2 quadrants there. Punitive, using a lot of exclusionary practices to address behavior and discipline, and then also being neglectful, right? These scholars who are having repeated offenses, we weren't building skills. We weren't preventing those things from happening again. We weren't giving them the skills to avoid using those behaviors. So of course, when I presented this information, I needed to, ultimately I was gonna ask an entire network to shift their mindset, right? And I had to give them the why. You know, we know that these challenges are the leading cause of teacher stress, teachers leaving, teachers not addressing the academic curriculum, you know, sitting behind their computers at their desks, or talented teachers leaving the profession altogether. We've seen it way too much. It's also the leading predictor of school failure and scholar dropout, or scholar failure, school failure, right?
Well, I can't.
Yep. I spent a lot of time talking with our campus leadership about collaborative problem solving and, the research that we know that goes along with that. And one thing that was really important for me to get across is what traditional practices do not do, right? They don't teach complex skills. They don't help our scholars regulate their emotions. In fact, oftentimes, they poke the bear, right? They're not building relationships. In fact, they're often destroying relationships. And they're not strengthening problem-solving and neural pathways. And for me, that's the biggest one, right? That's the money right there, because if I can strengthen those problem-solving strategies, I can prevent those behaviors from reoccurring. So traditional methods often lead to repeated behavior. We got so fancy with this slide deck. And your jacket matches it.
Oh, it
Anyways,
does.
traditional disciplinary practices rely heavily on motivation, right? We're relying on motivating the scholars to do what they need, and these procedures are aimed at giving the scholars the incentive to behave better. That implies, right, that it's will and not skill. I've always come from the place that, I think Dr. Stuart Adamon, he was a keynote speaker at this conference a couple years ago. And when I got to see him speak, I was like, oh my gosh, for the first time, there's someone presenting this with research to back it, what I've always believed to be true, that it's skill-based, not will-based. People do better when they can, right? And I fully believe that.
We also know that with COVID that we had our pre-K3s, our pre-K4s, our kinders, our first graders were at home, not building social skills. They were not having playgroups. They were not out on the playground having fun. None of that. They come in with a deficit of skills right now.
Absolutely. And we were playing catch up. And we were playing catch up in a big way. And I think we also came back to that with a little bit of panic around the skills that weren't being developed during those times. It was really important that our responses didn't make it worse, didn't perpetuate those behaviors, but that we were looking at it in a different way. One of the, I don't know if I want to call it an initiative, but one of the programs that I launched was a campus behavior coordinator coaching program. So we have a campus behavior coordinator at each of our 5 campuses. And I dedicated my time to meeting with them weekly to strategically plan. It was all about looking at the data we had collected the week prior for their campus, assessing that data, looking at who are our kids that aren't meeting expectations, who are our staff that might not be meeting expectations, how can we support that, what's an action plan that we can come up with, who's going to own those actionable items. So we would review that data, identify patterns and trends, develop an action plan with ownership. So I know when I leave those meetings that I'm going to be meeting with so-and-so to discuss so-and-so. And when I come back to meet this behavior coordinator next week, I'm going to report out on how that went. And we're going to action plan all over again from there. Nothing marinates, right? We would revise it as needed. We use this time to prepare staff learning and collaboration opportunities that were addressing those current trends. So if we see an upward tick in physical aggression on one of our elementary campuses, connect with the SEL coordinator to address from an SEL Tier 1 standpoint, right? Just to do a quick reminder with their staff at their assembly and their scholars. We would use this time to provide individual scholar collaboration, planning and support. So if we need to pull scholars in, behavior coordinators and I were doing this collaboratively this year. This year we wanted to get good at it as an administrative team. And I'll talk more about that later. And then obviously to provide crisis response support. We also used this time, and this became a big part of my time at the secondary campuses because they wanted to do the thing. But they've always lived in this very, well, when this happens, duh, right? And I'm like, well, what if when this happens, this doesn't happen, maybe this happens? And so it became, there were times that it was like, oh, are we gonna get there? I can't wait to show you how we got there. But we spent a lot of time talking about alternatives to punitive and exclusionary consequences. And what I always went back to for them was, okay, so tell me, how does that consequence build skills and build relationships? Because if it doesn't do these two things, we don't want to do it. This became the idea of the ideal consequence ladder. I would love to say that we knocked this out of the park this year. We started knocking this out of the park around the end of the third 9 weeks. We got a lot better at it, right? I think we're gonna really knock it out of the park next year. But by the third incident and beyond, that we're implementing collaborative problem solving and skill building with the scholar. We're not giving more code of conduct consequences. Another big thing that we did was we started talking about, right, like, when I see a behavior, I see that there's a problem that needs solved, right? And so if we're not talking about kids and their problems, then we're not helping them solve problems. We're not creating problem solvers, and we're just repeating the same cycles over and over. So special education became a big area. So those concentrations of 3% of the scholars were 60% of our office referrals. A lot of that did live with our special education scholars. And so it became very clear to me that we need to get on nothing marinates, right? We have to do that with these scholars specifically as well. So I developed what was called Scholar-Centered Planning Project. I meet weekly up front. We were able to fade this out a little bit. But we were meeting weekly on most campuses to sit down and talk about scholars. And it was really driven by the incident reports that were coming through. It was driven by teacher and paraprofessional observations. And I limited all compliance talk to 5 minutes. We weren't allowed to talk about how to write IEPs. We weren't allowed to talk about, all we could talk about compliance related basically was what IEPs are coming up. Let's talk about those kiddos today. It was really about scholars and just the problems that need solved. The big thing was having the right people at this meeting. It was the special education administrator for the campus, all of the case managers, all of the paraprofessionals, and that was the money. And you know, when you talk to principals about like, hey, I need all the case managers, I need all of your paraprofessionals, they're like, it can't happen. I'm like, it needs to happen because we can't solve problems for kids if we're not all talking about problems that kids have. So they made it happen. And then any other support staff, sometimes we would have LSSPs pop in, we would have speech therapists come in, OT, our director of special populations would join us. That has become a very strong program in our network, and I don't see us stepping back on that anytime soon. If anything, I see us ramping it up even more. Network Fridays. We have Network Friday one time a month. Is it once a month?
Once a month.
Once a month. We have network provided PD. And I remember asking one time, oh, what are the paraprofessionals going to be doing today? And somebody said, oh, I think they're probably building bulletin boards on their campuses. I was like, oh, can I have that? Can I hang out with them?
They're definitely building bulletin boards.
What was that?
They're definitely building bulletin boards.
So I started taking paraprofessionals on these Network Fridays, which is really one of my favorite things that I get to do during the year. And we talk about classroom engagement strategies. We talk about how to implement accommodations. We role play. We watch TikToks together and talk about why something might be a good strategy and not a good strategy. And you know what? Overall, we connect. And that has been really powerful.
They have elevated our parents so much.
Aww.
Paraprofessionals are always wanting instruction and they're always on the
Yes.
side, so they strive for autonomy.
If you ever want to provide development for a group that's hungry, gather your paras. They're like, tell me everything and let's talk about it. Can we do this again next week? They are just awesome. We also worked with multi-tiered systems of support, so I'm trying to get all of the groups, right? So with our campus behavior coordinators in tier 1, here's our tier 2, tier 3 gen ed, our special populations. But I did coach our MTSS coordinators. I attend all scholar team meetings, and for the reasoning of just applying behavior interventions where they're needed, to know where our hotspots are, to see, to drive interventions that are measurable, to see if what we're doing is working. That was a big area that we weren't great at. We would say, oh, we want to work on this with a kid, but it wasn't measurable, and we could never tell if our interventions were working. So me being able to attend those meetings and prioritizing that has been very beneficial. It then also helped me to know, teachers show up at these meetings and they talk about their struggles, and I said, hey, you know, but when's your planning period? Let me come and meet with you. Let me do some real-time coaching with you. And so it also gave me a really clear picture of where staff training needed to go. And then this came a little later in the year. I was looking at data from 23-24, looking at first semester versus second semester. And let me tell you, when we're tired, we go back to old days, right? We get really punitive there in the second semester, and it was very clear that that's the path that we were going to go down if I didn't do something different. So I reached out to T-Chat, and I always have to give T-Chat just a massive plug.
Yes.
If you're not using T-Chat,
Please
you're
do.
missing the boat. They are amazing. And I'll talk more about that after if you want. But partnered with T-Chat, they came out in January. They provided all of our staff with a compassion, fatigue, professional development opportunity. And it was really all about just like, hey, staying connected with yourself, recognizing when you're getting tired, when you're reverting to old habits, and just being self-aware, right? And so this ended up being pretty cool, and I do see us moving forward with more of that in the upcoming year. So from that data, our goals this past year were to reclaim time for our leadership teams to be in classrooms, supporting academics, and I'd like to add on to that, driving campus culture. I think if our leaders are out there driving the culture that we see best for our campuses, that's when it actually happens, right? And our move was that top 3 to 10% chronic behavior challenges with those 3 things that we just talked about. And then overall, developing behavior systems on each campus that support problem solving, teaching skills, and I'll add on to that, building relationships. Nothing marinates. All right, and so I'm going to pass this off to Ann because I want you to see, one thing that's really cool is when I look at each of the 5 campuses, they all went this kind of a different way because they all have very different personalities and identities. But I definitely wanted to give you a snapshot of what this looked like on one of our campuses, and Ann is going to share with you Eden Park Academy's response.
All right, so I want to give you a little background about Eden Park Academy. Yes, we were the OG for Wayside, but at one point in time, we were told that we were the behavior campus, and we got all the behaviors. Literally, they sent us the behaviors. We then decided to implement a behavioral unit, which went horribly wrong because we didn't have it set up the right way. Totally wrong. So we have spent the past 4 years, Kelli and I, and our principal at the time, Hayden Lander, have spent the last 4 years trying to recover from that. So this is where we're at and what we've learned as we're recovering from having a school that was basically considered a behavioral unit and doing it totally wrong. this is where we were at. Okay, so we had 5% EPA scholars accounted for 69% of our documented office referrals. 69% of that was documented office referrals. Our IEPs, our scholars with the individual education plans, was 61%. We lost 50 days of instruction. I know exactly who those babies were because they were in my office. I'm like, I got to know them really well. My husband got to know them really well the days that he came and ate lunch with me. Like, Pokemon was flying in my office when my husband showed up. So there's two things the way that we need to think about. What are the problems that we need to solve, and what are those solutions, right? So this is what we had to think about when we came into this, and we saw that we were spending all of our time on behavior. And so some of the initiatives that we created and talked about came apart from that first year that Kelli, Haley, and I were all together, and then we spread it across the network and refined everything as we went through. So we had to solve, how do we reduce 50 days of lost instruction, right? What are the struggles that we're having on campus? So these are the questions we're thinking. What is taking up our time as teachers, for our teachers? Our time as a SPED team. We were spending lots of times in high escalation, desks being thrown, things being ripped off the walls. Like, this is what we were spending our time doing, restraining kids. I didn't have to restrain a kid last year, at all, first year ever, as an admin. I was so excited about that. I also didn't get called stupid last year from one of my scholars when he was a first and second grader, called me stupid every day. And then what are we doing as administrators? There were a lot of things that I didn't get taken care of because I was dealing with behaviors. So what are our solutions? How are we going to solve these problems? Well, this is how we did it. This cracks me up, by the way. We had so many kids sitting in the office. Like, we have a tiny hallway in the office at Eden Park Academy. This is actually a picture from Altamira when I was the AP during the 23-24 year at Altamira, because they moved me over there for a year. And so this is actually my son. He came up to help me one day. But it's sort of like, this is where we were. We had kids sitting in the hallway because of behavior. And as you can see, that's an itty-bitty hallway. And yes, I love the fact that he's in the pre-K chair outside my office. That's what I'll admit. So he had to go up there. That was a huge problem for us, scholars in the office, right? If I have a scholar in my office that I'm working with, they're not getting stuff done. I'm not getting stuff done. It's just not happening. Big escalations. We had lots of big behaviors, lots of big escalations because we were the behavior campus. We're not. What are we doing with those scholars who are having issues in between each arts? Right? We can't call an art every week. How are we addressing those problems? How are we addressing how our SPED team reacts? Our SPED team was tired of dealing with behaviors. Yes, they're there, that's their first line of response, that's what they signed up for, they knew that ahead of time, they were still tired. How can we be proactive? Lots of instructional time, we gotta fix that problem for sure. And then this is what our data looked like during that 23-24 school year. It got broken down by week and quarter. So when I look at this, week 4, 1 through 5, in quarter 1, we weren't tracking yet. We decided to track afterwards, so we didn't have that data every week. Week 6. So week 6 hits for us, because we start beginning of August, middle of September is week 6 for us. 9 days we had already lost by week 6. Honeymoon is over. We also noticed that some of the other weeks were a little bit higher, and so really it was kind of interesting to see we got more punitive closer to big breaks. We get a fall break, we get more punitive closer to fall break because the kids' behavior acts up because they're stressed about what that week's going to look like and the change in the routine and all those problems that we know we have to solve ahead of time. What are our solutions? One of my friends is one of the friends that I worked really hard with this year that's in this picture. And I got a happy picture, so it had to go up. So this is what we did. We had a campus behavior coordinator. I was very disappointed that it wasn't me, by the way. They're like, Belcher, you're an AP, there's just you and the principal, you can't be it. You don't have time. I'm like, okay. Scholar Center Planning Project, we dove deep into this. We then had our Zen-Den. You'll get to see our Zen-Den here in a little bit. It's very reflective if you get to go into the participant lounge and see the Zen-Den in there. Multi-tiered support system. Behavior has to be included. Collaborative problem solving, building relationships, campus systems. So this is our behavior coordinator. This is Jenkins. She is our SEL coordinator. She just finished her counseling master's degree and is in the process of getting her counseling certification through TEA. And so she was responsible for working with Kelly. I wanted those meetings, by the way. I mean, Kelly and I, outside of school time, was just not enough. I wanted those meetings too. I didn't get this. She was in charge of updating an educator handbook. That was my job before. That was always me. I always did that kind of stuff. She was also in charge of filling out and turning in the PEAMS discipline documentation that we had to send to our student data. I was in charge of that too. And then I continued to get those emails from our network about that going, hey, did you have anything for September? Did you have anything for October? I was like, no. We had no out-of-school suspensions, no in-school suspensions, no physical restraints, nothing to report. I taught her how to fill those out, but she couldn't remember how to fill them out because we did it so rarely. Her and Kelly started working on the collaborative problem solving. And so much so that they brought the scholar into the room during their times, and I sat at the door listening, going, I really gotta go somewhere else, but I wanna stand here and watch, right? And then she came into our SLT meetings, our school leadership team meetings that we had on Wednesdays, and we had an SEL spot for her. That we talked about hotspot scholars, we talked about what is the data from Educator Handbook showing. We're talking about what teachers are having emotional dysregulation. And then, this is kind of cool. We actually came up with a data collection form. This is one of our scholars. I'm going to give you a moment to see one of our stuff. So this is actually one of our friends that we started collecting data on to see what was going on so that we could problem solve. These are broken down. This is one day. This is one friend, one day. We wanted to know when the incident happened. We wanted to know what kind of disruption it was. Who's in the classroom? What adults in the classroom with them? We learned very fast that this scholar did not like art. Lots of escalations happened, transitioning to art. Just didn't like it, but he loved to color. He would draw all day, but didn't want to go to art. What it looked like, the disruption, how he repaired it, how we got him back regulated, what did he do restorative, did he fall asleep afterwards? He had such big behaviors that he would fall asleep exhausted after those behaviors. We wanted to track that as well. 4 incidences in one day.
I'll dive in here very quickly because I have to talk about Ms. Jenkins. If you want to reduce punitive actions on a campus, make your SEL coordinator or school counselor the behavior coordinator. This was just an excellent move, and actually we're doing it on more of our campuses next year. When we talk about the data, immediately she'd say, you know what, I'm gonna pull a small group this week. I'll let you know how it goes next week. We're gonna talk about this. Well, let me do a restorative circle with these buddies. And I'm like, okay. And wait until you see the impact that this collaboration had on their numbers. It's pretty
Or
great.
the day, the week that she was out on a wedding, and we had kids who lost their solid object because she was gone.
Yeah.
That was not a fun week. All right, so this is our scholar-centered planning. So of course, we're trying to solve those issues in between ARDs that are coming up that aren't necessarily IEP related, but we still have to address, right? So this is actually one of from our agenda that we use. We have a running agenda that we use daily, every week that we debate. And so if you notice, the first 2 people, they have new IEPs coming up. The very first one, he was my friend that called me stupid starting in the 1st grade. We discontinued his BIP this year. I know it's right at the top of it, and that one's gone. And his teacher actually did a really great job of creating a relationship with him, and it was her adopted child, and it was hilarious. It was quite fun.
You mean she built relationships and helped him build skills, and And it worked?
Yes, built relationships, built skills, and it worked. We got off our bit. So we actually took the time, so like I would go in here, I was in the middle of an O3, so that's when we have our one-on-one conversations with teachers that I'm working with and I'm coaching. And they would say, Belcher, this is happening. And I go, oh, that's one of our friends. Let me immediately throw it in the agenda. I'd pull it up, throw it in, what we talked about, this is what we're seeing. I go, okay, we'll talk about that on Friday. When I have the whole team together, we will talk about that on Friday and see what we can problem solve, and I'll get back with you. I'm like, okay.
It was so nice to have this outlet. I would throw things on Scholar Center planning project agendas in most of my meetings. Like, oh, let me get that on there. We'll talk about it, we'll problem solve.
Yeah, we use Google Calendar all the time. This is on our calendar invite. For those friends, we can always access it. Zindan, so this is our Zindan, so this is actually what it was. We're small enough that we were able to take over a classroom. We're still figuring out where it's going to be this year because we're expanding and shrinking a little bit. But it was really a space that had an opportunity for the scholars to either catch the behavior beforehand or dysregulate, to re-regulate. And so we had reflection sheets, we had magnet blocks. My kinetic sand ended up in there at one point in time. We had a sensory pad. I have a little wobble board that one of my kids just loved. He thought it was the best thing in the world. But it activated his core and helped him calm down because he was expending energy in a different way, right? So we wanted to make sure that we were being proactive with this. We'd sign in, we'd have conversations, we'd do a reflection sheet, we work on a restorative conversation with the scholars. If we needed to do a restorative circle, we did a restorative circle. And then we figured out what we needed to do to get back into class. We built social emotional skills during this time. We had those conversations. We pulled out social stories. We sat down with the scholars they were struggling with and worked through those problems together. That's what we did in this space. Restorative circles. We had a group of 5th grade boys that we had to do this several times, hanging out here on the carpet, having some restorative circles because they're 5th graders. And they have lost impulse control because they are going through puberty. Had our multiple calming activities that we talked about. We had a referral process. We also had it where a teacher could say, hey, during one of our O3s, this scholar I think could really use a break at this time of the day. We'd build that into our schedule and make sure somebody was there. We had a 504 scholar that needed a break and needed a snack break. Each one of the admin team and our SEL coordinator took one of those days, threw it into our calendar, and I spent 10 minutes just hanging out with him while he ate snacks on Thursdays. We always called parents if they came to the Zindan. That was the biggest thing, is we had to include parents, because if we can't do all of this by ourselves, right? Parents became our best friends for those friends who were in the Zindan quite a bit. They became part of the solution. And it kept them from sitting in the office. Now, I can have a caveat. We had told you we use this for dysregulation and to help the kids regulate. I had a scholar that if we caught him, when you could tell his emotions were upset, he could come in, we'd set a 5-minute timer, he'd pick an activity, he'd re-regulate, the timer would go off, we'd go back in the classroom and he would be fine. If we did not catch his behavior that early, and it got into the high level where he had started throwing things in the classroom, coming into the Zindan was still too stimulating, I actually had to take him to my office, show him where my books are. He's a book lover. Show him where my books are. He would sit at my desk with Wacky Wednesday. We would read Wacky Wednesday for a week. And just sit and read so he could re-regulate so we could get him back into the classroom. Zindans can still be too stimulating. Just be aware of that, and you might have to change according to what your scholars need. So we're not losing instructional time because we are building essential social emotional skills. This is where, when we go into Educator Handbook with our referrals, that we're putting skill building. Okay? So natural consequence, skill building, not loss of privilege. They are still learning if we're building social emotional skills. It will translate to their academics later. Multi-tiered support. I love this graphic. It was something that Kelly gave us that's in our leadership guide. is that behavior, we have to think of it just like we do academics. We were in a presentation earlier and they're like, which one comes first, academics or behaviors? And I'm like, well, it depends on the kid. Sometimes behavior comes first. Because of their behavior, they can access academics. Sometimes their behavior is triggered by academics. Sometimes they're acting out because they're low, right? So there's all different reasons, and they have to go hand in hand. If we're working on behavior, we have to be working on academics. If we're working on academics, we have to be working on behavior. One of the things that we're adding this year is something that we didn't do really well last year, is I actually sit with my same goal up. That's what we use to track all of our Tier 1, Tier 2, and SPED documentation, as well as our LPAC documentation. I sit with it up. We talk about goals, and me and the teacher are immediately creating a Tier 2 plan or a Tier 3 plan so that we can immediately start that progress monitoring. That's my big goal for this next year. GMAC is what we do all of our common assessment data on. For my friends that are moving into Tier 3, especially when they're talking about Tier 3 reading, who they can have oral admin, I'm immediately going to GMAC and I'm adding that so they can immediately start practicing how to use it. Nothing marinates. Because then I would go home and I'd forget. Let's just be honest. You know, I think we're all ADHD at home, but we're so focused at school we just don't know it. God and my kids are all adults, and you know, it's fun. We moved into collaborative problem solving, so this was Jenkins and Kramer working together on this, but it also bled into my principal, Mary Rodriguez, and I. We also started doing this with some of our other kids that we just really needed to focus. So one of our friends, we learned that he wanted mountain breathing, so we breathe up and out, up and out, like make a little mountain. He also needed to take a break. Even if he didn't realize it, he needed to be out of the room, out of the sensory overload, just out. But we also learned about him was that he didn't want you in the room. Not that I could legally leave him in a room by himself, right? But I would tell him, I go, I will sit by the door. I will even stand with the door open so that you have more space. The lights can be off. He didn't want the lights off, and it was silent in the room. We learned with talking through him, the conversations we had with him, that that's what he needed. My other friend, this is my friend Cooper. He hangs out in my office. I got him for Mother's Day about 4 years ago. So he's about 4.5 years old. A friend of mine, the conversation that happened from our problem solving time was that he wanted to come see Cooper. Okay. He now has a break card that says, going to see Belcher Cooper. That he would ask the teacher for, the teacher would hand it to him, he'd walk up to see me and Cooper. And hang out. He fed Cooper, he'd water Cooper, I'd pull Cooper out, and he'd hold him. Cooper's a crested gecko, he jumps. He thought it was the best thing in the world. And for him, what we learned was that he always wanted to tell his side of the story. What happened? Tell me your side of the story. Because of course I go in, ask the teacher, hey, what's going on? How are things going? What happened? I get all the stuff from the teachers. Our scholars have different perspectives. I have to know their perspectives so I can meld the two together to find out what actually happened. And help him realize and take ownership of his actions and how he responded. Yeah, it's perfectly okay to be frustrated about what just happened. The way he responded by throwing something in the classroom was not okay. Let's pick a different response. Building relationships. If you don't have your teachers doing this, please, some of these friends, the only reason that they did so well this year is because of the relationships that were built. So we did what's called 2 by 10. What is that? It is talking for 2 minutes daily for 10 days. What am I talking about? Anything but academics or behavior. I'm learning out what's their favorite sport. I'm learning they love Pokemon Go, but they don't like the cards, right? I'm learning what their favorite animal is. We had a little friend, she loved cats. So if I walked into a time where she was dysregulating so much that she wouldn't listen to me, I immediately shoved a cat video in front of her. She calmed down and I could pull her away so I could have a conversation with her. Gotta build those relationships. So what are we looking for? Bubbles, drawing, what do they enjoy doing, right? You're becoming a solid object by doing this for our scholars?
Yeah, so the solid object theory is something that we teach through Use Handle with Care. And the solid object relationship model is simply when your kids are here, you gotta be here, right? When they are experiencing chaos, you gotta be the calm in the storm. And so when you don't have the opportunity to build relationships, and as administrators, oftentimes you haven't had the opportunity to build a relationship with a scholar when you get called to the classroom, but what you can do is be the solid object in the space, right? And that will bring a calming energy to the situation. So we use solid object theory when we haven't built those relationships yet.
So one of our scholars, ones that we were talking about a little bit earlier, I had a sped teacher, who's a brand new sped teacher this past year, and he looked at me and goes, Belcher, I don't know how to work with him. I go, I don't know if he would even respond to me in one of those times of high escalations. I don't know what to do. I go, cool, don't worry about those high time escalations, call me. First of all, you're not ready to handle that, you're telling me you're not ready to handle that, call me. I will handle the high escalations. But what I want you to do is anytime you're on the playground the same time that he is, anytime you see him in the hallway, in the cafeteria, in an assembly, something, I need you to start talking to him outside of those high escalation times so that you can start building a relationship so that he will respond to you if you have to show up for an escalation. He's like, oh, okay. He's so willing to learn and it makes me amazing. We had another kid, a scholar of ours, who worked with him since he was in kindergarten, hated recess. What kid hates recess?
It's too hot.
It's too hot, I'm gonna start sweating, it's gross, nobody wants to play with me, got all those kind of things. I finally convinced him he would have a meltdown every day during recess. What kid has a meltdown during recess? They were like, yeah, let's go, they're off the door before you are. Not this time. Finally got him to where he was the person taking the sports equipment out. I put Pokemon cards, he was one of my Pokemon friends. I put Pokemon cards in the recess bag, so he always had them outside. His teacher, Miss Holly, amazing! She did a great job with developing relationships with him. Between the two of us, we got him outside, I think it was like October, and he went to recess every day since October. Loves it. He's got a group that he plays soccer with out there. He's not out there Pokemoning by himself. He's fully engaged in recess where we want him to be. Because we took the time to build relationships. Ron Clark. You gotta go back to Ron Clark at some point, right? So if a student respects the teacher and sees that he or she cares about them and is truly trying to help them, they're going to be far less likely to cause problems in the classroom. That same friend took forever to get into math because it took him forever to figure out that math teacher cared about him. Campus systems, right? We have a consequence ladder. The big thing that was really important on this for us was after those warnings, is that scholar reflecting on their behavior? What happened? Who did it impact? How do they feel? How do I feel? How can I fix it? Teachers calling parents, they have to call parents first. Behaviors have to come from teachers first. Parents need to know from teachers that behaviors are happening in class, so that when I call on that third time that it happened, as we talked about earlier, they're not going, who are you and why are you calling me? My kid did what? I go, yeah, they've been having problems in the classroom for the past week. They've been having what for the past week? Your teachers need to be talking to parents. We use Class Dojo as a parent communication, and they were told this year one of the initiatives that we took on our campus was that, hey, we had some issues today, I'm gonna call you in about 30 minutes. You call the parent to talk about behavior. It is not a text message through Class Dojo. Because then everything gets messed up, people read messages wrong, just as we know with text messages. You have to make a phone call when talking about behaviors. Let's talk about icons.
Awesome. So the summary of all of that is that our systems have to do two things specifically: build relationships and build skills, right? And when we build relationships and we build skills, then we can collaboratively problem solve with our scholars. That develops their problem-solving skills to reduce these reoccurrences. That was the whole goal. And so here are our outcomes. Oh, this is 8.
This is me. So this was us in 23, 24. 50 days of lost instruction. I have like 5 kids and I can tell you what this 50 days was. 8 days of out-of-school suspension, 10 days, let's just call it 10. 10 days of parent pickup, which by the way, chapter says is an out-of-school, chapter 37 says is an out-of-school suspension. Let's just be clear about that. ISS 21 days, we were losing a quarter of a day per scholar that was on our campus. You want to see what it looks like now? This year? Show them what it looks like now. 6.57 days of lost instruction. Yes, thank you. No out-of-school suspensions. Parent pickups was a little scholar pre-K3 that was a huge struggle, and parents were Venezuelan, and there was a struggle to get them to understand what was happening in the classroom, as well as parent training. We were in that thing this morning. They needed parent training. It was their first kid. They didn't know how to address behaviors at home either. And so that was one of our biggest parent pickups for them. ISS, half a day. We dropped down 2.03, and I keep reading this wrong every time because there's a 0 in front of them. I'm like, oh yeah, that was a third of a day. No, we're talking like an hour per scholar. So this is what the percentage of our reduced loss of instruction looks like. You ready for this? 87%. Right? So this is where we were.
And she looks like she could be a young you.
I
I didn't
know.
realize that when I took this picture. But the dance nonetheless. Yes.
Right?
All right, so when we look at all 5 of our campuses collectively, this is where we ended up. We started out with 529 days of lost instruction, all of those things. I think this is the first time we're talking about scholar costs. We're losing 3/10 of a day per scholar enrolled at our network. And this year we reduced that to 232 days of instructional cost. From 173 days of OSS to 67. Parent pickups down to 3 days. ISS 142. Per scholar cost, significant reduction. So across our network, we reduced loss of instruction by 56%. And literally it's because we don't let things marinate anymore. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this looks like a year from now. Because we started getting really good at this into the second semester. It was very clunky at first. And I was like, are we gonna make any of this happen? We made it happen.
You turned the dancing out too.
Well, there's a dance in here somewhere.
Oh.
There is a dance in here somewhere, it's not yet. It's just not yet. So this is what it looks like per campus. The instructional cost in 24-25 in the blue, 23-24 in the red. NST is network.
Look at the middle school.
The middle school knocked it out of the park. I mean, when I look at my secondary campuses, I could not be more proud of the mindset shift that those
Huge
campuses.
mind shift, especially with our middle school.
Here's our average per scholar cost difference between the 2 years. And here is our look at ISS, OSS, and parent pickup from the 2 years. Because it's PEAMS reported, I was able to start tracking OSS as early as when I showed up. And I'm going to share those numbers with you. This is what it looked like in 21-22.
A lot of out-of-school suspensions.
Yes. The middle school really liked an out-of-school suspension that year.
We got good leadership, it helps too.
Yeah. Alignment is good. Together we reduced practices significantly. This is from last year to this past year. In-school suspensions reduced by 53%, out-of-school suspensions 62%, and parent pickups 86%.
Amazing.
Oh,
There's our names.
Yeah. And so when I initially presented all of this to our network, I said, you know, we just didn't know better. Well, we didn't know better yet, right? We now know better, so when we know better, we need to do better. And we sure did. Here are the resources, and I have to give major shout outs. I mean, Dr. Ross Green, the School Discipline Fix with Stuart Avalon, amazing stuff if you're looking to bring collaborative problem solving to your district, network, campus, what have you, classroom, right? That's the next step for us, actually, is in the 25-26 year, we are now staying the course. So we'll continue with the collaborative problem solving approaches, the campus behavior coordinator programs, scholar centered planning project, of course MTSS, all the other things that we looked at. But what we want to do is broaden our scope. So now we're going to take the collaborative problem solving strategies to classroom teachers. Because that consequence ladder I showed you earlier, first offense, second offense, by the third offense we should be collaboratively problem solving. That can start in the classroom. Our kids it is my hope that, you know, when we talk about the ladder of consequences that Ann talked about on her campus, that one of those steps before we're referring to the office for, of course, nonviolent chronic behaviors is a collaborative problem solving session between the teacher and the child. We will happily help facilitate that. We will happily partner to make that happen. This past year, we really just wanted to solidify this as a network, and honestly, before taking it to our teachers, we wanted to make sure that it was going to make the dent we needed it to make, and it 100% did. So now it's time to broaden the scope, and we'll be taking this to our teachers this year. I'm super excited about that.
Very excited.
Educator Handbook also is a big piece to making this happen. It is our data collection platform, and it is super user-friendly. It's interesting, you know, I told you I started in 21. It took us a while to get data with consistency and fidelity. Right?
Teachers weren't putting stuff in.
Right, it had to become a habit, right? So once we made it a habit, that's when we started to really look at the data and make decisions based on it. It took a while for us to get to even a place where we were collecting data that we could make decisions on. But Educator Handbook made that happen. It's not abnormal for me to see a paraprofessional walking down the hallway entering something in Educator Handbook. On their phone, has a great app, it's really lovely, and I can customize everything so there aren't punitive words in it. So I'm able to drive collaborative problem solving session, I'm able to drive restorative conversation. I can put things in there like, what did it look like when you repaired harm? All those things. So Educator Handbook can't talk enough about that. And then there's our website.
All right, so this is a great time. We have a little bit of time left. Questions?
For TChat, you said that they worked with your staff on strategies, that was their own strategies, is that correct?
Yes, so the focus was compassion fatigue and self-awareness, recognizing as educators when we are exhausted, right?
December. We're exhausted in December.
Yeah,
Right
so-
before we go to break, right?
Yeah, it was perfect to do that when we got back in January. I'll expand on that this coming year, and do a check-in every month after
So they
January.
would come and do, so they did a January training?
They did a whole staff PD.
Okay.
We did our secondary in one group and our elementary in another group. They gave specific strategies for teachers. They gave them warning signs to look for. They gave them opportunities to develop kind of their own coping toolbox. It was really awesome.
was really
And they gave them strategies to use to tap out, right? It's okay if they give permission to say, hey, I'm a little overwhelmed, do you have capacity for this today? They gave them language to use when before I think we were just reverting to old behavior.
Yeah, and that's something I know our campus has worked really hard to recognize when a teacher is so overwhelmed that they themselves need a break. Like I can walk up to a teacher, look at them in the face going, oh, like I'm not gonna be able to have a conversation about what just happened, I need to take that scholar away so you can decompress, or it's, hey, let me step in, what are you teaching, take a break. Right? Because they have to have that opportunity to calm back down themselves so they can be productive and successful for everybody else in the classroom.
Right, so for us to accomplish these things, I think one of the most important things we can do is retain staff. Retain good staff. Retain effective staff. That's who I want to keep. And so I would like to expand on this even more next year. One thing that we're bringing to the table with the campus behavior coordinator and I will be also looking through those incident reports for stress from staff. You know, you can read it. You can read when they're like, right? And so you're like, ooh, I would like to start adding staff check-ins to our action list. Like, hey, let's check in and hey, I noticed that incident report you put in, it sounds like you're pretty stressed out. How can I help? Right? Things like that. Because we do want to retain our staff. I attended, it's a virtual training through Texas State called Mitigating Teacher Maltreatment. I don't know if any of you have heard of it or attended it. I did go through the training to really kind of preview it for leaders to see if I felt like they all needed to attend. I won't say yes or no one way or the other, but I have decided to just bring some of those procedures and policies back to us, and we'll be adding those. And it really did outline some great ways to follow up with teachers after there has been a significantly stressful event, in writing, in person, those kinds of things, and an administrative checklist that goes with it. That'll be something else that we're implementing. This is a pretty tough time to lose good teachers, so we want to avoid that.
45% of Texas teachers are uncertified at this time.
How does your campus behavior coordinator, where they collect data? Do you have, I heard you mention like a minor incident report or something like that. Do they, is the teachers do a minor incident report on their system and then the coordinator picks up on that, or does the coordinator?
Yes. It's a little bit of everything, right? So yes, so when we go into Educator Handbook, it automatically pops up, and when I look at my reports, it gives me office referrals. Those are the ones that I'm directly involved in, right? When we go and look at minor incidences, you may, hopefully you remember your login.
I have no idea what my login is, because I never log out of it. But this is Educator Handbook.
Yeah, so it'll show you, like right here, it says Shermer High School, 14 minor incidences. I can actually click on that, and what it does is it lets me, I can search by scholar. So I can say, okay, I know that George has been having problems, the teacher's been telling me about it, let me look at George. I can look for him. It'll tell me what days is he having the most issues. Maybe it's a Wednesday, maybe it's a Friday, because he's gonna be home with his parents all weekend and there's some trauma going on. I don't know, right? So it's gonna tell me what days are most of the incidences occurring. It's gonna tell me which types of incidents occur the most, whether it's not doing work, if it's physical aggression, is it cussing, what is it, right? It'll also then tell me what time of the day those are happening, right? So it could tell me that he's struggling at recess. I then know, my teacher then knows, our behavior coordinator knows that we need to have a conversation and problem solve what's going on at recess and how we can make him more successful at recess. So that data is there. So for some of our friends that we're going through the MTSS process with, they're in tier 2, tier 3, as we're thinking about a special education referral. We get more data, right? So we need more specific data that we look for, and so we'll create a document, which is what we looked at earlier, to do that.
I like the document that you have, except the issue at my campus is that, for example, your data has very specific points, like just a teacher very quick, like snippet, so it doesn't give you any details as far as the time frame, or when did it happen, so it's hard to collect data when you have something like that, that's not my.
Yeah, so we actually use a template that we created. It came back from the lack of information that we were getting from referrals. I guess that second year that we were together.
Yeah.
And it tells us what's the description of what happened. I want to know what the trigger is, especially if it's something I'm not seeing till later in the day. I need to know what the trigger is. What's the intensity we do out of a 5? So a 1 through 5 scale, 5 being most intense. What strategies did you try to intervene? Did you ask them to go to the peace center? Did you have a conversation? Did you do a reflective sheet? Like, what did you try to keep it from getting to an office referral? And then we also have a suggestion for like next steps and then a duration. How long did this incident occur for? Specifically because we do ask for the time, you know, Educator Handbook asks for the day, the time, the activity. So are you in centers or are you in a whole group lesson? Are you at recess? Like, it asks all those questions, but it doesn't help me get to the information that I needed. So we created a template that we use network-wide to help us dive into, so that when I pull that initial report, I'm like, ooh, I need to know more about what's going on Wednesdays. I pop into all of those Wednesday incidences and I can read and figure out, oh, the trigger's the same thing every time. I go through and I address the trigger.
So it really came down to staff training and us problem solving ourselves, and we realized that we also weren't getting the descriptions that we needed. So we developed that template that they have to copy and paste into the description. We did it with a lot of grace in the beginning, but now if we get one that doesn't have the template, we just shoot it back to them and say, hey, you know, plop the template in here and send it back to me, right? And that's why it took so long. All of the staff training to get the documentation that we needed to be able to make decisions on the data we were collecting. I'm sure Panorama has a ton of reports you can pull and all the things, but we were looking at some different platforms, and this had the interface that we feel is best, and it's 100% customizable.
The problem with Panorama is that it does provide you data, but when it comes to those, like referrals are done on a separate system. So you have to look at the minor incident reports in Panorama for just what have you done in the past, and then you have to look at the referral on a center.
Yep.
So it's two separate systems that cannot communicate.
That don't communicate, that's,
So-
yeah.
And ours
Again,
communicate.
My fear is that I really like that you get rid of a template, like a Google form or something, so that way you can get more accurate data, but then you throw in
Another thing to do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
exactly. We have to balance that.
Unless you do a template on a Google form, and then the APs are the ones that put the referral on.
And with that sheets form that you saw, that I would sometimes,
Pull it up, but-
yeah, the sheets form that I had, there would be times that incidents would happen. They would tell me what happened, and I would actually, while I was sitting with that kid while he was dysregulated, while he was re-regulated, I would actually enter all that data, because they didn't have, the teacher didn't have the capacity to do it at that moment. So yeah, I actually did some of that myself. Oh, there you go. Find the names.
Yeah, so this is our middle school from last year, 412 office referrals, 444 minor incidents. I can go down through and click the actions that we used the most, right? I can click here, I assign which ones result in instructional costs. There we go. And so I can get those in order. Office referrals, minor incidents. When they put in a minor incident, it just goes into minor incidents, right?
We don't get an email or a tick or anything that's saying that.
No. But if it goes into office referrals, it'll sit in pending until an admin reviews it and applies an action. A specific, here we have something, it's not, it didn't mask. So I can't click on it because it won't mask their name.
I think that was the teacher.
Oh, was it the
That was
teacher?
the teacher that.
Oh, okay, I'm like,
Otherwise it says, well, yeah,
No.
no, it has the name. You
It
can
does.
sorry.
So normally you can mask right here, but apparently if you click on it, it won't mask the
It's not
name.
masked.
But you can see our minor incidents, you know, we were documenting those heavily at the beginning of the year. Hopefully, office referrals, I can see which days Which offenses, shocker, at the middle school attendance violations.
Attendance. They were late to class.
And so, when our middle school team sat down and we were problem solving for next year, it's like, okay, what are we gonna do about attendance violations? Because what we're currently doing is not working, right? Here's the data. We gotta do something different. And so that's what they're problem solving right now. Yeah, so big fan of this. Also, some of those other platforms, like there was one that we were looking at, I can't change things, so it's like you can have an office referral or a warning. I don't want the word warning there, that's punitive. I just want to collect data, I don't want to give a warning. So, yeah, this educator handbook, big fan. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much. Maybe you should run to the.
I was like, you got 5 minutes before everybody else gets out. Go, go, go.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.